My name is Michael, and I'm 38 years old. I found a collection of old VHS tapes in my mother's attic while rummaging for items to put in our yard sale. Most of them were titled something like Michael's 5th Birthday or Christmas of '89, but there were a few blank ones too. I was feeling nostalgic, so I grabbed the tapes and brought them downstairs. My mother still had a VCR in her TV stand, so I hooked everything up and popped some tapes in. Memories that I had long forgotten resurfaced as I watched my younger self. I spent the whole day getting lost in the past. I picked up a tape with a scratched label. All that was legible on it was the year, 1992. That summer, a massive construction project that had taken up the center of our sleepy town, Maudeville, was finally unveiled. It was a gaudy 3-story complex splattered with smiling woodland creatures, happy clouds, and all the colors of the rainbow. A huge neon sign hung from the front that read, Mr. Candy's House of Fun, in bubbly letters, each a different color than the last. The House of Fun was advertised as a child care center. Our town was in dire need of a new one after the last one was burnt to the ground in a freak accident. The owner, Mrs. Leslie, was found among the ashes. There was a wire that had burned into her foot, which was determined to be the cause. The fire chief said that she must have accidentally stepped on the wire, which seemed to have been stripped by a small rodent. The electricity fried her body and started the fire. The whole town was devastated by the news. Almost everyone had children that attended the daycare, and they'd all considered Mrs. Leslie part of their families. After a couple years, most of the children and adults had gotten over the loss and were desperate for childcare. My mother worked double shifts at the local diner to provide for us, and she couldn't find a reliable babysitter. This new place had answered everyone's prayers. 2 things in particular were very alluring to the parents. The daycare was open 24/7 and was free for all ages. I put the strange tape that I'd grabbed from the box into the machine and hit play. The tape opened to me sitting on the floor of our living room, watching TV as my mother was getting ready for work in the background. I don't know who set the camera up or why it was recording such a mundane day, but neither my mother nor I seemed to notice it. I was 7 years old at the time and an only child to a single mother. As I watched my 7-year-old self stare blankly at the TV, a commercial came on that sent shivers down my spine. A clown dressed in raggedy clothes with a colorful bow tie, a large orange afro, and a big red ball for a nose spoke to all the viewers in a whimsical voice laced with a heavy lisp.
Hello, boys and girls of all ages. My name is Mr. Candy. I invite you all to come on down to Mr. Candy's House of Fun. Get lost in one of the many rooms filled with games and toys. There's no sad faces here, only smiles filled with cheer.
Then the tape ended and ejected from the player. I hadn't heard that voice in a very long time. I forced myself to forget it, although I didn't recall the reason until I heard it again. It hit me like a train. My mind sent me back to that awful day. That commercial played on our TV just as my mother had gotten off the phone with my most recent babysitter. They canceled at the last minute again, and she was about to look for a new one. She saw the commercial, and her face lit up. She hurriedly got me ready to leave, and took me to the center of town. Mr. Candy was standing outside, greeting all of the parents and children as they walked into the building. His smile unnerved me. It seemed to be just a little too wide for his face. His eyes were devoid of any emotion, and for a split second, I thought I saw them flash completely black and return to normal. I became extremely anxious and tried to protest against being left there. My mother didn't believe me when I told her what I saw. Instead, she scolded me for telling lies and said she didn't have time for this. She had to be to work in 15 minutes, so she walked me into the building. There was a receptionist at the desk who also gave me the chills. Her smile looked painful and forced. She handed my mother a form to fill out and took me inside. She dropped me off in the large play area at the center of the building and walked back to the front desk. The complex seemed bigger on the inside to me. It was just like the commercial said. There were tons of rooms filled with all kinds of toys and games with child-friendly music playing over the speakers. It truly looked like a child's dream house. The atmosphere was off, though. I felt like there was something that my mind just wasn't comprehending. And that's when I realized how quiet it was. I was the only child here. There should have been multiple kids screaming and playing inside by now, with more pouring in. I decided to check the closest room to me. It was empty. I checked some more and it was the same for each one. As I reached the end of the building, I started to smell a strange odor. It was a sickly sweet scent. I didn't mind it at first, but it became increasingly potent as time went on, and I got sick to my stomach from it. The last thing I remember was feeling extreme nausea and passing out. I woke up in my bed the next morning, confused. I went to the kitchen for breakfast, and my mother was there. I tried to tell her what happened the previous day, but she didn't believe me. She scolded me again for lying, saying I had a blast there, and I didn't want to leave when she arrived to pick me up. I insisted something was wrong with the new daycare facility. She didn't want to hear any of it, and sent me to my room. After that, my memories were fuzzy. I looked back at the box and saw that there were only 2 tapes left. One was labeled Michael's First Day with Mr. Candy. Looking at the tape made me feel uneasy. I put it in, and the machine whirred as it ran the tape. It looked like a video from security cameras at Mr. Candy's House of Fun. I didn't remember there being any cameras inside the facility. The video showed a disturbing scene. It was me. I was playing with a large group of other children. We were dancing around in a circle. Mr. Candy was at the center, with that unsettling grin plastered on his face as he laughed that unnerving laugh. Every child in the dance circle was smiling that same smile, including me. The screen went black, and I sat there for a few minutes confused and sweating. I had no memory of this. I stared at my anxiety-riddled reflection, questioning my reality. I was snapped back when the tape suddenly ejected itself with a click and fell next to the box. There was one more tape left. I was scared to touch it. I didn't want to see what horrors awaited me on that last tape. The label had just 2 words. You're invited. My heart was racing now, but I needed to know. I needed to remember. I slowly put the tape in with bated breath. There was static for a few seconds, and then it cut to the outside of the daycare. The film was silent. What was once a playful building was now dilapidated. The windows were all boarded up, and there was graffiti on almost every square inch of the first floor. The bricks were cracked and decayed, and the colors were faded. The video slowly panned to the left, where the silhouette of a man was standing in the front of the building, motionless. It zoomed in closer, and the details started to form. It was Mr. Candy. His once colorful attire was now sodden and gray. His hair was patchy, and his makeup was smeared. The camera zoomed in onto his face until it nearly took up the whole screen. He wore that same sickening smile. My stomach turned at the sight. The camera stopped, and there was silence for an uncomfortable amount of time. It was probably only 3 or 4 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then he spoke.
Hello, Michael. We've missed you.
I screamed and fell back away from the TV. His eyes followed me.
We would like to invite you back to Mr. Candy's House of...
No! Fuck you! I don't know why, but I felt this deep, primal fear as soon as he said that. I knew that I never wanted to go back there, but I couldn't remember why. Something happened back then that my mind either can't or won't let me remember.
Oh, Michael. Naughty words are not allowed here, but we can overlook that one. Come on down. We'll be waiting for you.
and with that, the screen turned to static. The last couple of words were distorted, like multiple voices were trying to speak at once. He was talking to me. It wasn't just a recording. He actually responded to me. The tape stopped and rewound itself before shredding itself in the machine. I didn't try to stop it. I was in shock and didn't move for what felt like hours. My mother eventually came looking for me and found me conscious but unresponsive. She shook me and I snapped out of it. "Michael, are you okay?" I finally heard my mother ask. "Oh, hey Mom, sorry, My mind went blank. "Mom, do you remember Mr. Candy?" "What? Of course I do. You used to love going there with your friends. You guys would spend the whole day there. It was almost impossible to get you to leave. You didn't like it at first, but after the first day you got used to it. I even had some old tapes of your time there, although I never really had time to watch them. I think most of them got lost over the years, though. Why do you ask?" "I found some of them, Mom. They aren't what you think they are." "What are you talking about?" she asked incredulously. "There's a tape in the VCR right now, and it wasn't a recording, Mom. It was alive. It talked to me." My mom walked over to the player. "There isn't anything in here, Michael. Are you sure you're okay?" My heart sank as I scrambled to check the machine. The tape was gone. It just vanished, along with the previous tape. "I'm fine, Mom." Was I going insane? Did I imagine those tapes? "Okay, well, I'm going back to the yard sale. Feel free to join me if you'd like." With that, she walked back out the front door. I sat there contemplating what I should do. I was eventually able to build up the courage to go and investigate that old daycare. I told my mother that I was going into town and left. It was a 5-minute drive from my old house. When I arrived, the building was gated off with warnings against trespassers. The building was condemned by the local fire chief years ago. It was due for demolition by the end of the month. I climbed over the cheap fence and made my way to the front door. I recalled the fear I felt when I saw Mr. Candy for the first time. There was something not quite human about him. I remembered his grin that was too wide for his face, and his eyes that were just a little too big. I shuddered at the thought as I touched the front door. It was unlocked, and I walked in. The lights slowly flickered to life. The music that used to play was now slow and off-key. It added another layer of discomfort to the eerie atmosphere. I stepped past the main lobby and up to the front desk. The same woman from my childhood stood before me, with that same pained smile stretched across her face. She hadn't aged a day. "Right this way, sir," was all she said as she guided me back to the play area. The lights were dim and the floor was damp. It smelled like mold and mildew. Game systems that once played their welcoming tunes now sat quiet. Their lights died out years ago. The play castle that used to be so inviting to climb on was now covered in grime and a dark, viscous liquid. The ceiling tiles were water-damaged and caving in. I walked to the back room where a long table was set with multiple chairs. On the opposite side of the table sat Mr. Candy.
"I'm so happy to see you, Michael. Please take a seat."
He gestured to the seat across from him. The second I sat down, I smelled that sickly sweet smell from before. It was the same smell that made me nauseous and dizzy. This time was different. When that scent wafted into my nose, memories of my childhood came flooding back like a tidal wave.
"We've been waiting so very long, Michael. We're so happy you decided to come back."
Mr. Candy's mouth started to open as if he was laughing, but it kept opening wider and wider.
"It's time to join your friends, Michael."
His jaw stretched to the floor, revealing dozens of tiny, child-sized hands, clawing at the opening, trying to escape. I was the only one who got away back then. I was the only survivor of this hellhole. All of my friends were now a part of this thing. I left them all to die and forgot about them. The hand stretched out towards me. I didn't try to fight them off. I was entranced by the horrific sight before me. And that's when I started to smile. I smiled as wide as my mouth would allow. My skin pulled against my face, and my cheeks split open. It spread across my entire face until there was no more room to stretch or rip. I welcomed my old friends with open arms and a big, happy smile.